Are you having trouble finding hand sanitizer? Well, Spa Treat has you covered. There's no need to go searching high and low. Just visit spatreatofficial.com and place your order on their easy-to-use website. On-schedule delivery. One of the great things about this product, Spa Treat Fulfillment Team is working around the clock to provide people hand sanitizer during this time of need and get your order to you as quickly as possible, even faster than Amazon. Spa Treat also has the lowest price of any of its competitors. Spa Treat has 62% alcohol content, and the FDA recommends between 60 to 80 for maximum protection. This one has 62 because it doesn't dry your hands out. I use this stuff every single day. It is fantastic. It's got certified organic extracts with the ingredients in that hand sanitizer that are of the highest quality, and they're designed to leave your hands smelling and feeling fresh while protecting you at the same time. The best part, there's no tricky residue left over. None of that sticky stuff. 4 scents available: unscented, tea tree, lavender, and lemon. And best of all, this product right here is made in the good old United States of America. A lot of companies are having trouble dealing with the current demands, so Spa Treat has dedicated themselves to providing a much needed product in the time of crisis. Spa Treat has better prices, faster shipping, and a larger supply than any of their competition. There isn't even a close second. Visit spatreatofficial.com and enter promo code SPA SPA at checkout to receive 5% off your entire order. That's right. Not only are they offering the lowest price available, but they're also offering our listeners a discount. This promo code is exclusive to Voice America, and only our listeners get this discount. Spa Treat and Voice America came together on this sponsorship in order to provide Americans something they could really need right now: peace of mind. Visit spatreatofficial.com and order yours today. That's spatreatofficial.com, and make sure you use the promo code SPA at checkout to receive 5% off your entire order. spatreatofficial.com. Get your awesome hand sanitizer.
Mark, you're 1 Charlie. Mark, 1 Charlie.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I'm full of optimism.
Einstein's theory of relativity.
We're still seeing it quite well through that haze.
T-minus 37 seconds.
The fight is growing confident.
E equals MC.
That all men are created equal.
About the future innovation.
And growing strength in the air.
Tear down this world.
Head on. Something's happening coming up on station.
This is Finding Your Frequency with your hosts, Jeff Spinard and Ryan Treasure. It's time to speak up, share your voice, and hear from the thought leaders.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another wonderful episode of Finding Your Frequency. I'm your host for the day, Ryan Treasure. And if you're listening to us from your favorite podcatching device, please make sure to share this with your friends. Give us a nice rating, because we always like to hear your feedback. Send the reviews. And if you have questions, comments, or concerns about the program, we always like to hear from you guys at info@voiceamerica.com. So, we had some really interesting shows so far, this year. We did some interesting stuff around public relations and connecting audiences to the new normal, and also talked a little bit about, following creative arts in your free time as you're working from home, with our guest Claire Fullerton, which was a great show. And, and making sure that while we're all dealing with all these different things, that we're staying true to who we are and, what our core competencies are, and, all those great things. And, so I wanted to just bring up the idea of, everybody out there in this new world. Business has to keep going. You have, small businesses on the decline, and, a lot of different kind of changes that are happening where people working from home, and, just a lot of challenges as we try to recoup and maintain our livelihoods in all of the stuff that's going on. So I wanted to take a few minutes and talk a little bit about B2B sales and how that's working, for those large companies, how some of the shifts have been happening. So we have a great guest for you guys today. He is the founder and director of Proverbial Door. And what a great and awesome guy he is. He's going to be joining us. Moeed Amin, thank you for joining us. He's been in the business for 20 years, obsessed with how and why people make the decisions they do. With his journey starting with graduating in neuroscience. Neuroscience to sales. That sounds like an interesting background. I'd love to hear that story. Learning the evolution of brain structures and impact on how the psychology of decision making happens. So, thank you, Moeed Amin, for joining us. We appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for having me on.
So, the first part of your bio is really interesting because you have, this whole, how does the mind and the brain work and the psychology of decision making, which is, kind of a cool facet of something to talk about, especially when you're, trying to get somebody to buy something from you.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's the fundamental of all things, right? When it comes to our society and the way we interact with each other socially. So yes, it was an opportune and by accident as well, which was a happy accident.
Happy accident, right? I've always been interested in NLP or neuro linguistic programming, and I've as a radio personality and a voiceover talent, I've got the opportunity to read several books for Audible around the NLP thing. So just by osmosis of doing that, I've got a great understanding of how that works. And I know probably some of that happens with the psychology of decision making and how that works as well. But, and we can talk more about the, nuts and bolts of those things. But I'd really like to hear that story of, how the neuroscience helped, and just kind of, you're interested in how and why people make decisions. And I'm interested on why people decide to do what they do. So, take a moment and take us backwards a little bit and tell us how, you found your frequency in life and in business and decided to, step out and do what you're doing right now with the B2B sales and consultancies and training and making teams and all that.
Yeah, gosh, that's a big question. I think like most people in sales, it was never my intention. Did you ever do, Ryan, maybe when you were younger in school, did you ever go through that exercise where your teacher would ask you, what would you like to be, or what would you like to do when you grow up in terms of your profession? Did you ever go through that when you were young?
Oh, yeah. I have a 6-year-old right now, and we play that game a couple times a week. She's always changing her mind.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because I was exactly the same. I had no idea. And you try to ask a 6-year-old a question like that, and it's not very many 6-year-olds will have a definitive answer that stays true with them for the rest of their lives. I went down what was culturally acceptable for me. So from my background, my parents, where they're from, you're either a doctor, an engineer, or a failure. I mean, there's no in between, right? Maybe lawyer. But it's not something to be proud about. It's not something your parents would tell their family about and their friends. It was either those two things. And when I was asked that question in school, you could have given me 1,000 different, or asked me to write down 1,000 different scenarios. Sales would never have been one of those. And it's unusual, because I tried to go down the medical route, and I really didn't enjoy it. I was very good at it, but I didn't enjoy it. And not surprisingly, I didn't get an acceptance into medical school. However, one of my backup options was neuroscience, and call it intuition. I don't know what it was, but there was something really, really powerful about that decision, because I didn't know why, but I had this incredible feeling that this was a really important decision to have made. And when I thought about it a few weeks after making the application, to me, and we talked about this just briefly, I just mentioned it earlier, society, the way we interact, the world around us, not from a physics standpoint, but from a social standpoint, everything that we have at some way, shape, or form came from that decision that was made. And those decisions that are made are based upon the structure of your human brain and your nervous system. And I knew that back then. And I knew that was the path I wanted to take if I wanted to understand everything. But I just didn't know how to apply it. So when I completed the neuroscience degree, I was obviously like a lot of people attracted to money, right? And I thought, okay, how can I select a career, that would make a lot of money for me? And I didn't see neuroscience, being a neuroscience researcher, doing that. So what did I do? I converted to law, because I thought, my mum was a lawyer, and maybe I'll enjoy it because I have the same DNA, right? And completely flawed reasoning. Not surprisingly, I did not enjoy law at all. In the UK, the legal professional system is slightly different to the US, where in the US, moving up the career ladder in terms of seniority is partly to do with your competence, but also partly to do with the level of business that you bring in. In the UK back then, it wasn't like that. In fact, it was about doing the job for 15 years and slowly moving up the ranks based upon your tenure, not the value that you bring. And to me, that seemed completely alien. I didn't understand that. And lo and behold, I hated the work, the paperwork, the immense amount of reading, staying up at 2 in the morning. I'm not too bothered about staying up at 2 in the morning. I do it right now, but it wasn't something that I enjoyed doing. So after completing the legal conversion degree as we have here, and I even completed the advanced degree to become a solicitor, I was stuck. I had no idea of what I wanted to do as a profession and what I wanted to be. And I kind of thought about things like accounting, but really I was just stalling. And I kept seeing job applications, job offerings for sales. And I thought, you know what, why don't I give that a go? Because yes, the base salary seems to be lower than, say, the legal profession, etc., but the potential earnings seem to completely outperform them. And I thought, well, why don't I give this a shot? I will try it for a little bit until I find something better. And I went to a few interviews, completely tanked on those interviews, until one day I went to a group interview and I performed incredibly well. I was one of the most sought after by employers from that interview. And fell into sales that way. Now, it wasn't smooth sailing because the first year I had to make the decision of either handing in my resignation or getting fired. So I didn't have a great start to sales. Luckily, I handed in my resignation, but luckily I was headhunted by a company. And that was the beginning of my love affair with sales, because I stopped trying to conform to what other people were telling me of how I should conduct sales. And I began to go back to my neuroscience and cognitive psychology roots. And the learnings that I applied from there helped me become a high performer during the last financial crisis. So between 2008 and 2012, I was one of the top 10% in terms of high performance. In fact, in 2009, I was #1 in the company in terms of sales performance. So I got to go onto this 5-star trip to Mauritius, etc., as part of that. That's when I started looking at sales being more than just sales. It was about influencing. It was about persuasion at a very deep human level. And I then was headhunted in 2012 by another company. And then my trajectory just went through the roof. In fact, I was mentored by a top 10 sales author. In fact, he's regarded as the third global sales guru, a guy by the name of Matthew Dixon, who wrote the Challenger Sales book and series, co-authored them. And the path that sales took for me was about, I realized during that whole experience was that the bigger the vision, the bigger the team that you needed. When you think about people that are doing some incredible things in this world, they're not doing it on their own. So they've had to convince and influence not only people to join them, but to stay the course while things get tough. And to me, that ability to influence and almost create a movement felt magical. And it was during that sales process that I started to see how I enjoyed that process so much. And you ask about frequency. The frequency for me, the vision is so much bigger than just sales. It's about helping our species, humanity, reawaken and kind of take back its nobility. And there are various competencies and elements to a noble individual. And one of those is the ability to be able to communicate with clarity, with vigor, with power, with emphasis and emotion, and to get their point across in a way that moves people to take action in their own best interest, not necessarily in the influencer's interest, but in the recipient's interest. So the frequency for me was always about, helping people see how I can help them, getting them closer to their deep-seated human needs and desires, and really being able to influence people in a way that is ethical, but with some science rather than art, because I was definitely not the typical profile of a salesperson. I was not an extrovert. In fact, I was an introvert. I came from a science background. There was nothing about me that screamed, successful seller. In fact, quite the opposite.
Right. Well,
so really, that's my frequency. That's my journey into finding
awesome.
that frequency and where I am today.
You guys have to check out this new service that I'm playing around with called Issue. It is totally amazing. You live to create, but you don't live to worry over the last nitpicky details involved in putting final touches on contact. You got to do what you do best and let Issue handle the rest. If you're a creative, you know the drill. You're finally done editing. It's perfect. Now you just need format and reformat for every single platform. With Issue, make it once, and it's ready to post everywhere. Seriously, Issue is the all-in-one platform to create and distribute beautiful digital publications, from brochures to magazines and sales collateral. It's perfect for creators, marketers, designers, educators, publishers, salespeople, or just anyone that wants to make eye-catching content that can be distributed on multiple platforms. Issue makes it really simple. Just upload the PDFs and files, and Issue transforms them using your vision and customizable templates to create the content you want. With Issue, you just create it one time and distribute it everywhere. Everything is optimized to post on your website, social platforms like Instagram and Facebook. They can even help you make animated Instagram stories. And the best part about it, it is free. FREE free. That's right, it's free to get started with Issue. So go to issue.info/frequency to sign up for your free account. That's ISSUU.info/frequency to sign up and let them know that you heard about it from this show, Finding Your Frequency. Remember, that's .info, not .com, .info. So go to ISSUU.info/frequency and get your free account today. So at what point, as you were going through that particular experience and, understanding some of the psychological components and science behind selling, at what point did you decide, I don't want to work for anybody else. I'm going to go start my own business and going and founding the proverbial door? What was the mainstay behind that? Because as you mentioned before too, you were an introvert, you're a science background, and that's completely the opposite of stepping out of your comfort zone as an entrepreneur and starting your own business. Yes,
absolutely true. And I guess it was very early on in the sales career. So when I moved into that second company, and I decided very, very early on in that business to really not follow what other people were telling me. It wasn't that I was against what they were saying. It's just that I felt it wasn't working and it wasn't me. I guess it came about when I didn't enjoy being told what to do. I know that sounds almost kind of I'm throwing a tantrum, but I really didn't enjoy people telling me what to do, or at least telling me how it should be. Because to me, that felt that I was living my life in their image of how the world should be. And, it just didn't feel right to me. So I would probably say around actually 2009, 2010 was when I started to have this feeling that really I was living my life and giving my energy towards someone else's vision and image of the world. And I didn't go into entrepreneurship with the delusion about having, more time and more freedom to myself and spending more time with my family, because I knew how hard being an entrepreneur was. My father was, and my granddad was. So I know how hard. I'm glad you
had a logical expectation of what that is, because.
Yeah. And by the way, social media has created, in my opinion, this image of entrepreneurship that's not what it is in reality. And I think people get bought into the glitz and the glamour almost from what people are saying. But
I think they forget about the work. They forget about the effort. I mean, it's funny, your employees that work with you, right? They get to go home, and on Friday they're kind of, disconnected from work for a couple of days. And then they come back on Monday, at least that's, in the States, we work the Monday through Friday. Some people do 4 10-hour days or whatever, but and then you take a couple of days off, and you're not connected with the business when you're doing that. But the entrepreneur, the owner, those management structures, those guys and gals are taking phone calls at 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, interrupting date night.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, Ryan, what you described is responsibility, right? That's what leadership is ultimately. Through all my observations, experience, and research, and that's where sellers come in. Actually, where we notice some of the best sellers, one of their qualities is the responsibility and the accountability that they hold. Yeah. Not just to themselves and their targets, but what it means for others as well. And that, that was, I knew that wasn't going to be easy, but I wanted to move to be able to do things in my own image. In my own way, and make mistakes, right?
Yeah,
I tried.
We're human.
It was about 3 or 4. Sorry?
I said we're human.
Absolutely. And I failed a few times. I tried 3 or 4 companies that didn't work out for various reasons. And the best decision I made was not to give up. And I have to say I was very close to doing so. But it was around 2009, 2010 when I felt that I was learning a lot, but it wasn't right. And it took me quite a few years to step out, partly because of my risk aversion, partly because I didn't have anyone to push me and just say, look, just go for it, right? And kind of guide me in that way. I had to kind of figure it out myself, which is fine. But it was really around that journey when I started to think, enough's enough. And, I've got to, I can't live with that regret later on, because what's the saying? Regret weighs a ton, but mistakes weigh just a few pounds or something like that. So that's really the journey, and that's really the point when I decided that I wanted to move on my own. Is when it just started to become quite successful. I started to get some traction in sales, and I felt I wanted to do it my own way.
When you started the proverbial door, I know that that was kind of like a shift for you, right? You took a step out of being in direct sales and started a company that consults other firms and other entities in sales and training and building teams that are successful. How has that transition been, where you're teaching what you learn rather than applying what you learned?
Yeah, it's interesting you mention that, because there was a point when it was so clear for me that was the thing that I excelled in more than anything else. In 2012, just about 3 months.
That's because you were a scientist. That's why.
Exactly. And we'll get to that, by the way, because that was really a big deal for me, a really big turning point. In 2012, 3 months into my role, my manager, who was then actually the SVP of the business, very senior, and he decided to take me under his wing. He seemed to have seen potential in me. He was walking me through the specific elements of the training program that they were doing. And as he was walking through it, I stopped him. I said, that is just way too complicated, Christoph. The average seller is just not going to be able to get their heads around this during a call when pressure is quite high. So I gave him a framework, and he said, that is a great framework. And he said, do you mind if I take that and roll that out across Europe? And I said, not a problem. So they rolled it out across Europe. And then within a few months, it became so successful that they rolled it out across the whole business, across the world. And bear in mind, this company had 5,000 employees, of which about a third, I think, or maybe just under, were salespeople. From then, I was recruited as part of my role as a seller and then as a manager and a leader to also do the training. And in 2016 or something like that, I took a different route to the training. They gave me scripts, etc., frameworks that we're supposed to stick to, but I stuck to that, but I also wrapped it around my own way of delivering training. And we get evaluated after every training session. And at the end of that training session, for three or four training sessions in a row, I got top marks, 100%. And bear in mind, there were it wasn't just one or two people in training sessions. There was probably about 20 people, 30 people at a time. And that's when I realized that actually my skill, whilst I was a great salesperson and I was a high performer, my real edge, that magical ability I had, was actually in training, because I really cared about the success of the individuals. And I would follow up with them afterwards, which was beyond my role. But I was so passionate about helping them. It was just an innate desire in me that it became something that I really enjoyed. And as I enjoyed it, I sought new ways to make it even better. So
that's awesome.
Hopefully that answers your question. But that's when I realized that for me, moving into that role was actually very natural. It wasn't a shift for me, actually. It didn't feel like a shift. It just felt very natural and something that I truly enjoyed.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty non-standard too, where you get into an organization and you have somebody who's a top earner or a top performer, right? Not all top performers or top salespeople are good trainers or good coaches, right? They may be really good at sales, but trying to convert that or convey that to another person in a training session, those are two very different tool sets.
Agreed. And the other scenario you can describe as well is not all great salespeople make great sales managers. In fact, very few percentage of them can. So it's exactly the same, actually.
Yeah.
It's about imparting your knowledge in a way that motivates people, and it's very different from a sales environment. So yes,
yeah, I've absolutely had that. I've had that philosophy for the last 10 years that, just because you're very good at sales doesn't mean you're the best manager or trainer, and being able to identify those people in your organization that are able to take the reins in those spaces, is what creates also good leadership in a company, right? Identifying that talent that you have and putting them into a place to succeed. I always like to use sports analogies, right? If you're playing, soccer or football or any sport that has a team, you want to put the person that's on the field in the best place where they can be successful. And, that comes from good guidance, good leadership, good training. And those are all qualities that are extremely important, especially when, you talk about, being an entrepreneur and those responsibilities that you have. And I definitely have always had the take that, I'm never willing to ask somebody to do something that I'm not willing to do or can't do myself, right? Which is something that I think leaders really need to take into account, especially as we, move through some of this new normal, right? And you have, hey, you're at home, there's these expectations, there's nobody, at the facility keeping an eye on you all the time and what you're doing and, those types of things. And I think that from a training and leadership perspective, it's going to be difficult to, as we move forward, to pick out talented individuals that are going to be able to perform in those scenarios, because, that's another challenging thing that I've seen in sales, since the whole pandemic thing is you have a lot of salespeople that really perform, at the office, at their firm, having a dedicated space to be able to do what they do. And then, they go home and they don't get up and go through the routine of I have to get up and go to work, right? It's more lax sometimes in some cases, and I think that's a shift, I think, in the culture of sales that a lot of companies are dealing with right now on how those people are able to maintain their performance while they're at home, or maybe you had somebody who wasn't performing that well at the office and went home and now they're performing well. I mean, I think there's both ends of the spectrum, but my long-winded question would just be, are you seeing that trend as well? And as a trainer and a consultant in building teams, how are you guys jumping through that hurdle?
Yeah, it's a great question, because what you're describing is really around human traits now. Because one of the things I learned from a previous employer, and what they did very well, was when they were interviewing, and I did hundreds upon hundreds of interviews for salespeople, what we were guided on was primarily observe and interview for traits first, skills second. And what they meant by that, and this is now so important, because the world we live in is fundamentally changed in certain ways, where different traits will be more valuable in terms of the value you provide than they did before. And that's why you're seeing people that probably didn't work so great in a work environment where they used to come to the office every day, and they work so much better on their own. And then you also see on the other side where people are vice versa. They used to work great in the office, but now not so much on their own. And that's really down to traits of that individual, and it's core to sales, right? So one of those traits will be, yes, adaptability, but one of them is discipline, right? And one of the things I used to look out for in an interview is, what types of extracurricular activities does this person have on a daily basis? Do they do some form of sports or something that requires them to have discipline in their approach, where day in, day out, they are perfecting or practicing that craft? And that was a great indicator of this person's mental and physical stamina to not only approach and go through the grind on a day-to-day basis, but to also do so when things get tough, because it takes a certain attitude and kind of mental strength to be able to do that. So what we first look at are, what are the traits of your salespeople, right? Not just their skills, but their traits. Do they exhibit things like discipline? Do they exhibit things like adaptability? How is their mental state? And what I mean by that is their mental attitude towards the current situation. And that requires your guidance. And I tell sales leaders that you can only help show them the light in terms of the attitude and the kind of emotional state that they go through, but ultimately they are responsible for managing that emotional state. You can give them the tools, but you can't force them to do that. So do they have that kind of stamina and strength to go through that? Are they intellectually curious? So there was a study that was published in HBR that talks about the kind of, I think it was the 8 dimensions of a successful salesperson. None of it was about being an extrovert or being gregarious. It was about intellectual curiosity. Someone that is curious enough to want to learn, how do things work the way they do, and why does that happen? Yes, excellent communicators, but that's a skill. So in answer to your question, what we've seen in our company and what we've seen in our clients' business that a lot of leaders are not really grasping very well is, look for traits. What are the traits that marks a successful seller that's going to be working remotely? What does he or she have to do on a daily basis? And how do they approach things from an emotional and psychological and a personality standpoint versus skills? Because skills can always be trained.
Yeah.
I use the analogy of traits as a fertile bed of soil, and seeds are the skills. You can throw a ton of seeds on barren soil, and it won't flourish and it won't grow. But if you have a hugely fertile soil, which is the traits and the psychology, you can just throw a handful of seeds and it will flourish.
Yep.
And that's really what's core to this situation. And that's what I advise my clients to always look at first.
Yeah, I love that philosophy. And you did a really good job kind of explaining it in depth. And I've always had kind of maybe a more simplistic view of that. And I guess for me, I always tell people, I said, you know what, I might not be the smartest person in the room, but I will outwork all of you, and I think that's a trait, for employees, employers alike, that it's extremely important and definitely valuable to be able to flush those out. And I think you got to flush it out in a timely manner too, because you don't want to spend an enormous amount of investment of time into training somebody who doesn't have those underlying traits and is willing to, put in the work, right?
Yeah, I mean, the average bad hire can cost a company. When you talk about the salary, you talk about the time spent in terms of coaching, onboarding, training, all those things. The average cost for a bad hire per seller, per bad salesperson is, was it £85,000, which is what, $92,000, and an average of 20 days of lost time. So forget just the cost.
Yeah.
But the growth momentum is also stalled as well. And if you have enough of those, then it becomes a cumulative negative impact. So absolutely, what you just said about outworking and working harder than anyone else is one of a few dimensions that will really set aside high performers. There are a few others, but that's an important one, because it's how much you're willing to put in the hours, but especially when things get tough.
Yeah.
And do you give up, or do you find a way through? Now, we of course always need support, and this is where coaching and the right leader is important. But you can show people the door, but ultimately they're the ones that have to walk through it.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. What kind of challenges are people seeing when making those decisions, right? I know that you can talk all day about saying, hey, these are the personality or character traits of a person that I'm really looking for for success in my organization. But how do you identify those in a quick manner? I'll give you an example. Our company, just not too long ago, we just finished building an entire, we've done an interview and sent you an offer letter all the way through, the training and, all of those things. We've digitized all of this that we used to do in person, right? So we've went through this entire process during COVID, and it was a lot of time, and it was a lot of time from many people in multiple different departments, right? You have, graphic design over here supporting the documentation and the time, effort, and energy there. And so I'm seeing a lot of companies that are expelling a bunch of resources internally to do the same thing that we just had to go through in order to make sure that we can still bring in and pool in new talent and do that all remotely and still be successful in the business. And so that's been a big challenge. What kind of technologies or things are companies using that you're seeing now to mitigate some of those things to make sure that they don't have an extremely high cost to recoup as they start onboarding new employees remotely?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I always say that technology are tools. I spent 5 years involved in advising big companies on innovation, and we work with the C-level leader of some of the biggest brands in the world. Companies like Pepsi, Dow Chemicals, etc., BAE Systems, and they would talk about innovation and say, look, we want to drive more innovation, drive more ideas, and they would spend millions on a particular tool or a platform for people to submit ideas. But the problem was, that's just a tool, it's just an IT system, right? You've got to inject the will and the desire and the motivation to do so. So in terms of what you just asked, before you go into the technology, Stephen Covey said it best, right? I mean, a lot of people have said it in a similar way, but he stands out as most memorable, which is start with the end in mind. And the end is, for a salesperson or whatever role you have in a company, what does it take for that person to thrive within the current environment and the environment for, say, the next year to year and a half, maybe 2 years? It's really hard to look further out than that, right now anyway. So what would it take for that person to thrive? Let's kind of imagine ourselves, that person at home doing the work that they do. What is that daily work going to look like? So start with that and describing that. You'd be surprised how many leaders have not thought that through, not in detail anyway. They have a cursory understanding or expectation of what that person should be like and how they should conduct themselves in the daily work and grind, but it's not in detail. Once you have that, now you're in a position to say, okay, what traits would make that person flourish, make that person successful? And you kind of list out those traits. Now you're in a position to then say, what are the questions that we want to ask during that interview process to uncover those traits as well as skills? And I can't speak for other competencies and functions. I can only speak for sales, but this is how we did it in sales. And in fact, one of my products actually talks about this step by step, which is the whole point about a good interview process is that you're doing two things. Number one, you're obviously identifying the traits and skills, but number two, you're staggering the risk, right? And what I mean by that is the very first level of engagement in an interview, and especially in sales, shouldn't be more than, say, 15 minutes. Because actually, there's only 15 seconds for that salesperson to impress or create an impression on the buyer. And the buyer has made a psychological view of that person, right? And our brains, through evolution, are wired to do so. It's very hard to get away from that. So if they can't impress you in certain ways within the first stage at 15 minutes, that kind of gives you an indication that maybe we shouldn't invest any more time with this person. Or it tells you, actually, this person has covered the great things, and then we can take them to the next stage. The second thing that we used to do is ask competency-based questions, right? So these would be detailed questions where one question would be made up of 3 sub-questions. And it would ask them about scenarios that they faced in their past role or in their life experience. And the answers to those questions firstly, those questions are structured in a way that is designed around your product, your offering, your solutions, your type of buyers, the market you're involved with. So you're not asking just random questions here. They're within the context of your business.
Yeah, no, I always like to give somebody a scenario that's like exactly what you're saying of, in our business, we encounter this, and this. If you encountered this when you were here, how would you handle it? Those have always been, great questions that I like to use. So really love your train of thought here.
Yeah, and we take it a step further where I would ask, tell me about the last time, or tell me about a time where you experienced something like this. What happened? How did you approach it? What was the outcome? So what you're looking for are 3 things: situation, action taken, and then the end result, right? So what was the situation you faced? Tell us about that. What actions or steps did you take? And what was the result of those actions and steps that you took? And they don't have to always be things where the outcome was great. They could be bad outcomes. In fact, we encourage our sales leadership clients, don't look for only positive things, because sales, believe it or not, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to get rejection. You want to know, do you have people that can deal with those things? Yeah,
and it's important to analyze that too, right? You give somebody, those questions, and they give you a scenario in which they failed. I feel like, number one, for them to even showcase a scenario or talk about a failure, right? That takes some courage. But then also it opens up the door for you to understand, in this teachable moment of them failing, what did they learn from that, and how did they put that into practice later so it doesn't happen again, right? Which is one of my favorite roads to go down.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about detailed observation and getting them to talk about it, right? Yeah. And that encompasses so many different skills and traits, right? Listening, articulation, patience, being able to convey your message across, all those great things. And then the next stage from that is role play. I mean, and although that sounds obvious, the structure in which people are hiring for salespeople go about the role play is somewhat, it's a bit haphazard. It's not thought through properly. And what you want to do is apply a little bit of pressure in that scenario. I always tell sales leaders, apply a bit of pressure in that scenario. Why? Because again, you want to see how they perform under pressure. But if you have a typical sales call that may take an hour, reduce that scenario to about 30 minutes or maybe 45 minutes. Because you want to see how they conduct themselves, right? Because buyers are going to throw that at you, right? The amount of times that's happened to me, I cannot tell you how many times that's happened to me, where I walk into a meeting expecting to have an hour or maybe an hour and a half, but all of a sudden they said you've only got 30 minutes. So you've got to test for that. So role plays are incredibly important. Giving them the information so that they can research it beforehand. So what we used to do in CEB, which is now part of Gartner, is we would give them information about the buyer and information about the solution an hour before the role play. So they had an hour to research that. And their ability to ingest and understand and utilize that information was a great insight into their mental stamina and ability to not just ingest all that information at a quick pace, which is really important, but how they're going to do that under pressure whilst in a sales meeting as well, because they're going to be thrown a lot of information.
Yeah, is this and that's something I think that's the challenge, especially with remote working, right? The sheer massive amount of information that's given to an individual in a you know let's I think it's in both ways, whether you're doing a hiring process and going through this one, or even through training, right? You know, how do you make sure that those folks are, you know, you found the right person, they said the right things, you get them into training, and, you know, how do you retain their attention? How do you hold them accountable for certain areas when they're not physically in your space to have a one-on-one conversation, right? Because I think when you have the opportunity to look somebody in the eye and have a truly, you know, one-on-one communication with somebody, that to me is a much more effective way of communication than, you know, us looking at each other over Zoom where some nuances can be lost. And how do you maintain that structure in this new workforce that we're all dealing with, like or hiring what I'm dubbing the new salesperson?
Yeah, are you asking about new hires here? Still going into that process of hiring someone, or are you asking about existing tenured?
No, I think it's both, because what's happening is you're from a remote location as a hiring manager, or as a person being an HR person, whatever the case may be, sales management, customer service management, right? You're spending this time saying, I have to go through this vetting process, and then I also have a training process. In both of those processes, all of this is happening remotely.
Yeah, and you're asking from my perspective as training someone.
Yeah, how do you assess the effectiveness of that if you can't have a one-on-one communication eye to eye, right? It's way different looking somebody in the eye having a conversation than it is being remote, whether it's on the hiring process or the training side.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt it's uncomfortable because we're social beings, and proximity is incredibly important in terms of our evolutionary time, Ryan. You know, this technology is a speck in the dust compared to the universe of our timeline. So that's obviously difficult. But believe it or not, and I have a video cast with a gentleman by the name of Mark Bowden, who is a best-selling author in human behavior and body language, and according to his research and his experience, actually there is a lot that you can do to simulate more of a natural feel when you are talking to someone through Zoom or virtual video means or anything like that. In fact, the facial expressions and the eye movements are a big part of nonverbal communication. So there's a lot that I can do as a trainer to connect with with the person that I'm talking to and engage with them without actually saying a word, and vice versa. There's a lot that the person who's talking to me, there's a lot that they are saying to me through nonverbal communication. Right? Are their eyes always pointed downwards, for example? In which case, does that tell me that they're distracted? Their eyes, do they tend to tend to look upwards and to the right, in which case they're probably thinking about things. And there's always a probability, because sometimes it's never going to be completely accurate. But how you make that engagement and hold that accountability.
Maybe they're just reading notes.
Exactly. Maybe they're but the idea is not to be accurate, right? The idea is to be able to observe so that you have a more complete picture. Most people are completely unaware of something that makes up the majority of how we communicate. And we still naturally think about the words that someone says, but actually their nonverbal communication and your own is speaking far more in terms of magnitude and detail than words can. Because words, and most people say perception is reality. Absolutely not true. Emotions are reality.
Moeed, I love that you went into that without even me asking the question. I literally had written on my paper here, communication, verbal and nonverbal, and you just rolled right into it.
Yeah, but because it's so important. In fact, that becomes even more critical during this virtual kind of interaction and setting that we're facing. And just to answer your question, holding people accountable. There are various means in which to do that. Number one is the cadence by which you're connecting with people. Okay, so when I do training, it's not just one-on-one training or one-time training. There are some follow-ups that I kind of insist happen. Some of that's going to be face-to-face, some of that isn't. But here's the other thing. There are certain technologies out there that absolutely will help you. I did a video cast the other day with the VP of marketing for a company called Vidyard, right? They're one of a handful of companies that specialize in video hosting platforms. Mm-hmm. And there are so many techniques by which you can use video in your email communications, in your LinkedIn messaging, etc.
Great points.
Where you are talking to the prospect or talking to your customer rather than sending them a text email. The brain assimilates and computes images and symbols at 60,000 times faster than text. So actually, when you send a video that's 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or just 5 minutes, rather than send an email, the click-through rate and the engagement rate has been shown to be more than 400% of an increase than the.
Ooh, that's huge. That's huge.
So it's huge.
Wow! Thank you for that information. It's enormous when you think about it, especially that's a game changer in the world of sales and marketing. You know, Moeed Amin, thank you for joining us. We're getting really close to the end of the show here. I just looked at the clock and was realizing we've gone almost a whole hour here. So
well, hopefully that's a good thing.
No, it's been a great conversation. You know, where can people find out more information about Proverbial Door and contact you about what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. A few places. So proverbialdoor.com. Is our website, and you can contact us through there. I'm on LinkedIn, so linkedin.com/Moeed Amin, all one word. Same with Twitter, so /Moeed Amin. And we're also on Instagram, so Proverbial Door. So those are kind of the ways that you can contact me and see some more information about what we're doing. And of course, you can email me at mamin@proverbialdoor.com, and we'll be happy to answer any questions and help in any way.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for going such in depth and bringing your knowledge to the table and also telling us your story about, how you went from neuroscience to sales training, and, what a great story. And I think a lot of great information that the listeners can absorb. And, for those of you who are entrepreneurs running your own businesses, managers, or, anybody who's working in professional services, I think a lot of the stuff that we covered today is very helpful and great information. So thank you so much for being on the show today, Moeed. We appreciate you.
Ryan, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed that, and thank you for the great questions.
I don't know about you guys, but I absolutely love keeping my face nicely shaved, nice and clean for my wife, and just that nice, clean, professional look. I suggest you guys also do the same thing, and you can do it fantastically with a great company called Harry's. Harry's is such an amazing product, not to mention how much could you save in 1 year by switching to Harry's? It's enough to buy 26 cups of coffee in New York City, or enough for 3 deep dish Chicago pizzas. Enough to pay for 6 months of your Netflix subscription. How, you ask? Harry's delivers high-quality razor blades as low as $2 each. That's it, just $2. A fraction of the price of the leading brand, and saving you hundreds of dollars over time. I just love the product. It's a close shave. The design of the handle is ergonomic. It fits my hand perfectly. The shave gel really makes it nice and smooth, and it smells fantastic. You can get a Harry's trial set delivered to your doorstep by going to harrys.com/frequency. You got to try it out. Durable blades, fair price, $2 per blade. They cut out the middleman manufacturing blades in their German blade factory that's been making precision blades for a century. That's why you get that nice, close shave and that wonderful handle. Harry actually has all your grooming needs covered in one stop. You can get blades, hair care, shower products, all on harrys.com. And just like their blades, Harry's is committed to providing premium products without breaking the bank. You can feel a little better about about your purchase knowing that 1% of the proceeds are set aside for nonprofit organizations devoting to helping provide access to better mental health care for men and veterans. I know I can get behind that. To help support those who need it most, right now, Harry's is donating $1 million worth of shaving supplies to hospitals across the United States. Listeners of Finding Your Frequency can redeem their Harry's trial set at harrys.com/frequency. You'll get a weighted ergonomic handle for a firm grip, 5-blade razor with a lubricating strip, and a trimmer blade. Rich lathering shave gel with aloe to keep your skin hydrated, and a travel blade cover to keep your razor dry and safe to grab on the go. Don't forget, go to harrys.com/frequency and start saving money today. Thanks a lot. So you guys that are listening on voiceamerica.com on the Variety Channel, make sure you tune in every Friday at 12 o'clock Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern, as we bring you brand new content right here from Finding Your Frequency. And again, if you're listening on your favorite pod-catching device, please make sure to like us, rate us 5 stars, because I think we deserve it. We're definitely 5-star human beings, so let's bring it to the table there, and share this with your friends. Thank you so much, and you can get a hold of us at info@voiceamerica.com. Stay tuned next time for another episode of Finding Your Frequency. This is your host, Ryan Treasure. We'll see you next time.